Hello, this is Megan.
And this is Steven.
And this is the Synchrony Podcast, where we talk about transforming apostolic dating culture and ending loneliness in the church. And God help us, we are not going to be able to make it through this podcast at all without falling over laughing.
We are going to have to do a lot of editing.
You still have your headphones on.
Oh, you're right. I do. It's fine.
Yeah, it's fine. We'll just keep that in. We're joined by a very special guest. Steven, do you want to introduce our very special guest?
I do.
Go ahead.
This is my friend Edward. I have known him for at least over 20 years.
Hi, Steven.
We have gone through Boy Scouts together, middle school together, youth group together, and some things we probably can't even talk about on this podcast together.
Well, you gotta make it weird, bro. Seriously.
You're
Yeah.
the definition of making things weird, Edward.
Hey, thanks for having me. Hi, Megan. Hi, Steven.
Hi. Edward and Nicole, who is his lovely wife, who is off camera and is the only sane person in the room right now, I'm pretty sure,
It's true.
have been part of our relationship story since pretty early on.
Yeah.
You guys got married before we did, I think.
To be fair, Edward's been a part of all of my relationship stories.
Anyway, it's true.
I was the bear to hug.
This is going to be such a hard podcast to edit. Edward and Nicole, you guys got married, I think, a couple of years before we did.
2014, yep.
Yeah. And so we knew each other during the time that I was going to church at Stephen's Church in West Palm, where he grew up, and after when we lived there and after we got married. And Nicole, you actually took our engagement photos on the day that we got engaged.
It's true.
Yeah. So you guys have known us since the beginning of our fun and wacky relationship, which is cool. But we're here together because we're on vacation together.
Yep.
And we thought this would be a really good time to force Edward to sit down and talk with us.
It didn't take much forcing.
It didn't, but there was also nowhere he could go.
That's true.
Please send help.
So besides just being fantastic friends and us having, I feel like, a really chill relationship when it comes to talking about marriage and relationships, you guys are also really involved in kind of the single space within your church. So talk about what you do specifically at your church and how it relates to young adults.
So yeah, me and my wife are the Hyphen leaders of our church. We've been Hyphen leaders for now for think we're pushing 5 or 6 years.
Mm-hmm.
COVID kind of confuses things, right? But
Sure.
The dead years.
Yeah. But yeah, we want to have a group of about 30 to 40 Hyphen between 18, and we say 30-ish because as our generation grows older, people tend not to grow with their age, right?
Yeah.
So
People kind of have that extended sort
Yeah.
of sort of an extended, I want to say adolescence, but an extended young adulthood now
Yeah.
compared to
Yeah.
what it used to be.
yeah, it could be by because of different factors, right? But it just seems that people are pushing marriage and relationships further and further into their late 20s, early 30s. So we say 30-ish in our church because we have some young 30-year-olds.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's who I am.
For anyone who is not UPCI, Hyphen is the young adult ministry of the UPCI. So in case we have ALJC listeners or WPF listeners or anybody else who isn't affiliated with that organization, it is intended to kind of minister to young people in that in-between moment, sort of when they're coming out of youth before they've begun their own homes and their own households. And it's a vital ministry of the church.
Yeah, it's a very important ministry.
Why do you think that, I guess, kind of going off of that for a second, what makes that season of life so challenging? What's uniquely challenging about that season of being a Christian? Does that make sense?
Yeah, a lot of factors, a lot of things that you can't control, a lot of things that were kind of taught to us and not taught to us more so as we were growing up. I think our generation really struggles from learning what a relationship is. And since we don't understand that, we have a hard problem having godly relationships because we always, at least my experience is, people think, oh, if I get into a relationship, I'm going to fall into sin real quick.
Yeah.
So I just think a lot of that comes from the lack of communication from people that taught us how to be who we are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's that fear of kind of taking things into the next stage, right? Because we haven't been, we talk about this all the time, we haven't really been given the tools to know how to do that in a way that's safe. So it's kind of better to just not do it at all sometimes.
A common topic that we keep on bringing up in our podcast is we were taught what not to do, but not really taught what to do. And that's something that we're trying to change or trying to help at least bring up in conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a disservice that the millennial generation is having to kind of deal with now, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and younger. Which generation comes after us?
Gen Z.
Gen Z. There we go. I always want to call it Gen X. I'm like, that's definitely the wrong direction of the alphabet. But Gen Z.
And then after that, I think it's Alpha. Can't wait for the betas to come.
Something to look forward to.
Yeah.
Amazing. Okay, so another topic though that we wanted to talk to you about specifically, and we cleared this with Edward before we brought this up. Edward, you and Steven, I'm going to lump you guys into the same category because you spend a lot of time each other in what I will call nerddom, right? Which is made up of things like certain video games, like just the world in which you guys enjoy being. And you guys have like gamed as long as you've known each other, I presume.
I mean, all of our bachelor parties as we got married with Halo LANs.
Explain to someone who has no idea what you're talking about what a Halo LAN is.
Actually, I'll let Edward do that.
Like, paint the picture, because I have seen pictures of what a bachelor party. This is apostolic bachelor parties to some degree these days. An apostolic bachelor party of what we're describing looks. I compared it to looking like the pictures of the launch of the first space shuttle at NASA, where you just have a bunch of guys in a row in front of monitors staring very intently at the monitors.
That's not fair because there's not that much intelligence happening in that room. There's a bunch of degenerates in that room yelling at each other. So, but it's a lot of fun. It's great fellowship. Because really what happened was we grew up in a time that it was post 9/11, right?
Yeah.
So and then the recession happened. So our coping mechanism was video games.
Yeah.
Right. So there's a lot of people my age that grew up without social media, but in video games, and we grew our relationships with each other by shooting each other in the face consistently.
Right.
Metaphorically, of course.
And okay, like I want to sit in this conversation about video games because you would be surprised how often video games specifically come up in my consultations with single people. Specifically with single women. So one of the questions that I ask during consultation is, I say I'm going to give you a sentence that has a blank in it, and I want you to fill in the blank for me. And I say the sentence is, if my match were really involved in blank, I would find that very unattractive. Do you know what the topmost mentioned thing is that women call out that they find unattractive about guys?
Water polo.
You would think water polo should rank up there.
100%.
A ton of them say video games, and I know, and it's surprising to me because it's and this varies across age groups, right? Like, I mean, I've heard this from 21-year-olds, and I've heard it from 60-year-old women, right? So there's a recognition that men of all ages are playing a lot of video games, but I think there's a stigma attached to it, and I want you guys to kind of break down a little bit, like, as apostolic men, what has the landscape of video games done for you in terms of the value that it's offered you? Like, there's tons of arguments to be made out there for the quote unquote addictive nature of video games, the violent nature of video games. There's all those counter arguments, right? And I do think it's something that has to be kept in balance in a Christian
100%.
life. But what has it done for you as apostolic men? What's the benefit?
I would say community. Personally, I, as a practically as only child, my sisters were way older than me. So whenever I was home, my youth group was my world. And despite everything going on in my life, whatever trauma was in my life going on at that time, I knew that I could get on the Xbox, get on the computer, and go and hang out with my friends despite how much they may have made fun of me. Like, it was still a way to build community and to hang out with each other. But personally, that's what I use it for growing up. And this is actually when we were young. That was like very new to gaming, was online, being able to talk in a voice chat. And so that was what I personally used it for, but I don't know if you did for that reason too.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. It's a way to stay connected because you got to remember, this is before smartphones. iPhone didn't come out to 2007. We were gaming in 2004.
Yeah.
Right? So we're 13, 14 years old. Steven was 11 maybe.
Yeah.
But this was the easiest way to stay in communication with each other.
Yeah.
Right, because at the time the alternative was AIM.
Yeah.
Like
Oh
right.
my goodness.
AOL Instant Messenger.
Wow,
Yeah.
that was a throwback.
Right.
Yeah.
Some
Or
people.
like y'all remember Everyone's Connected, which this is even before that, but do you guys
Yeah.
remember that as the
Mhm.
early
Yeah.
apostolic connection process?
That was ahead of its time because it told you who visited your profile.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
I
that
knew
was
who
a-
was spying on me and who didn't look at me.
It's true.
Yeah, this is ye old online dating spaces.
Yeah, I refreshed that page and nobody else showed up. I didn't do that.
Just your mom.
Love you. So, okay, this is a really important thing because I don't think that people who haven't been involved in, like, I never played video games growing up, right? And I'll be honest, when I started dating Steven and when we got married, I was like, wasn't a huge fan of him bringing that into our life, right? Because it felt like it was so all consuming. But what we kind of figured out over time was like, Steven's an extrovert. And in the life that is common now, if you're a young adult, you're working a full-time job, right? You're probably involved in your church ministry. Our jobs and our ministries are becoming more and more siloed to where you're saying the same number of people, or you're not having as many opportunities to connect, right? Like we've heard people describe this as like the loneliest generation, right? It's easy for people to just really get into their lane and not connect with other people at a deep level. And video games was a medium by which I was seeing you maintain relationships with your brothers, like, the people that you grew up with who are really, really important to who you were as a person. Like, we moved away from West Palm, 6 years ago, 7 years ago? Almost
2017. So, yeah.
And you guys have maintained a pretty consistent relationship without having to schedule a phone call around your busy jobs, right?
Yeah.
Like
there were seasons where we didn't stay in contact, but with Edward we picked up right where we left off from the very beginning.
Yeah, I mean, we had babies, like there was interruptions or whatever.
Yeah.
So what's the I guess what's your reaction or response to the idea that women might be put off by a guy who is gaming? Like, if you had, if you were sort of like able to kind of just like speak to that group of women who are looking at the prospects and going like, yeah, if he plays video games, he's off the table. Like, what would be your sort of response to that?
I would say my response to those ladies, because I'm sure a lot of it they're well intentioned, but I just think it's lack of understanding, right? Video games are not just a way to kill time. It's also if you have a group of people, you're hanging out with friends, right? So as a married person, would my wife rather me go hang out with friends at some public setting where she's not around?
Yeah, like instead of going out with the guys, you're in at home with the guys.
Yeah, and that connection still occurs, right? Video games just becomes a medium to hang out with your friends.
The thought that comes to my mind as well is it helps scratch the itch of extroversion, right? Of being able to spend time with my friends, but also when you need me to stop and be available to help with kids, I can stop what I'm doing most of the time immediately and then stop and help. Whereas if I'm out at the pool hall,
I'm sorry.
It's hard to say because
what is this 1880? When I am out with my lads playing the billiards, like
but like if I'm gone, that means I'm leaving you to solo parent.
Sure.
Whereas this, when the kids are happy, they're present, and usually I wait until the kids are asleep to like get online.
Yeah, we did have to specify what types of games you could play in order.
Oh, sure. I modified that at whenever the kids first got into our lives and were present. But yeah, it gives me the availability to be more present if need be.
Yeah, would you rather have your husband out and about, not knowing what he's doing, or just home in a corner playing video games? You need that fellowship with your friends.
Yeah.
So what's going to scratch that itch?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think part of it, and I can empathize with women who are in this position because I very much had the same ideas. It's not so much the idea that any video games are bad. I think some women do have that perspective because they just don't see it as a valuable activity. Again, I think because of the lack of understanding of the type of like social connection it provides, right? I think there's a concern about it becoming all consuming, right? Like it's something that becomes an obsession or becomes an addiction, right? What does it look like to be a gamer in a Christian life where you're having to balance that social activity, and I think this goes for any kind of hobby or activity, right, that could take up your time. But the fact that it's in your home and it's always accessible does add that kind of layer of complexity, right? How do you balance that with a Christian walk, with a well-developed relationship with your spouse? Like, what boundaries did you guys have to set to make that possible?
I'll start with the boundaries part.
Mm.
Originally I tried to get my wife involved. It wasn't working.
I tried to. Didn't work either.
Yeah. But I think that comes from a need that you want your spouse to be interested in things you're interested in, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you can't force that.
When
But
you first get married, you're figuring out what you guys have, what you guys can share together.
yeah, exactly.
And I realized very quickly that was probably something we weren't going to share together.
Yeah, my complete lack of hand-eye and thumb-eye coordination should have been a clear indicator of that. I'm doing the thing where I'm like trying to use the controller and I'm throwing it at the screen to make it do something.
Yeah.
Which
She's
yeah.
one of those.
No, I feel that. So I wanted to get my wife involved, and clearly that wasn't a thing. So, you just gotta not treat video games as a priority. It's
Yeah.
really more of an escape,
Mm.
right?
Yeah.
It's, hey, my responsibilities, the things I'm responsible for are taken care of.
Mhm.
I have time to kill. People go watch TV. There's no difference between TV or video games, in my opinion. But actually, I retract that. There is a difference. You're more mentally connected
Yeah.
and actually thinking and
Yeah.
solving things and doing stuff with your brain while you're playing video games rather than just watching and
Yeah.
being told what to do or listen
Yeah.
to or whatever, right? So it's more engaging in that sense. Plus, like I mentioned, you're hanging out with your friends majority of the time.
And I've even seen Steven, like, this was actually something that helped kind of change my mind about video games early in our marriage. Steven actually had a few opportunities while he was playing with people who weren't in church, right? Because, like,
Mhm.
there's games where you meet people, you
Mhm.
know?
Yeah.
He had made friends with guys that he'd encountered in this game, and he actually had the opportunity to witness to them. And there were moments where, like, he was able to step in and really support people and demonstrate, like, you know, Christ to them through a medium that most ministers are not going to be able to access, right? Like, if you are not a gamer, you are not in that space.
Yeah.
And I don't want to, like, over spiritualize it
Yeah.
or, like, make a hobby into a mission field. But at the same time,
Yeah, we're not going to the bar to try to save people's lives.
No,
and
no.
Right.
Save people's
Yeah.
souls, right?
but having Christians in that space is valuable too.
Mhm.
Like, because when the opportunity presents itself, you're there.
Yeah. I had a close connection with these guys because I'd been playing with them for years. And one of them lost their brother.
Mhm.
And I also gamed with his brother too. And out of the group of friends, he knew I would be more emotionally supportive of him in that situation. So he reached out to me. And so that was a really cool opportunity to be able to share, in his unfortunate situation, share that experience with him. And whereas if I didn't know him, he wouldn't have had that. So,
Yeah, and to kind of backtrack to your original question,
Mhm.
when it comes to ladies that like to find that as a turnoff,
Mhm.
you just gotta understand that video games are just a medium to do something else, right?
Right.
I repeat it, it's a way for us to connect with each other, right?
Yeah.
And the people that might be strangers at first become family, become brothers, become
Mhm.
whatever, because these are actual people on the other side.
yeah.
Right.
Yeah, you might be killing dinosaurs or doing whatever you're doing, right? Because I think you were playing Ark, weren't you?
Yeah, that's Ark.
Yeah.
Ugh,
But
the good old days.
that,
Yeah.
that might be the surface level, but behind it, you're creating friendships, right?
Yeah.
And some of my longest friendships I have were forged over video games.
Yeah.
So would it be fair to say, like, video games themselves, and I'll put a big asterisk on this because I think we can all agree that there are some video games that are not appropriate for Christians, right?
Wait, what?
Oh,
There's is that a joke or were you asking me to repeat myself?
That was a joke.
Just making sure. I also mumble.
It is 12 o'clock at night, and she's on a cup of coffee.
Only one cup of coffee.
Edward refuses to drink coffee
You
at
guys are
midnight.
insane.
I know. So I think it's safe to say that there are some video games that are just not appropriate for Christians, right?
Absolutely.
But gaming as a concept is not like it's not like more or less moral than any other hobby,
Mm.
right? People are going to come and abuse that hobby if they are needing something to abuse, right? If they
Yeah.
are struggling with addictive behaviors and that's the thing that they focus that on, it'll become the problem, right? at the same time, you can have someone who uses that as part of their life to just relax or to build community with friends, and it serves that purpose without having kind of like a moral or immoral agenda.
Yeah, I agree with you wholeheartedly, but it takes being aware of how much you're gaming or how much you're doing any activity that you're doing in a marriage.
Mm-hmm.
Like Edward was saying a second ago, it's just a medium. Looking at your phone, scrolling on TikTok or Facebook or YouTube Shorts is also a medium, right? So if you choose to look at that for 45 minutes, a lot of gamers view that as, oh, I could use that time to be productive, you know, and that's what we view as productive, right? You know, some people don't view video games as productive, but we're working towards something in that. Whereas, like he said, we're using our brains. But that being said, there were some boundaries that had to be set in our marriage at the very beginning, because when we first got married, I was imbalanced, you know, and we had to have those conversations. And also we didn't have kids at the time. So it's easy to be like, let's hang out. You're an introvert. I'm an extrovert. You're like, I want to go to my room and recharge. I'm like, great. This is a good opportunity for me to leave and go play video games. But this is before we had a balanced conversation and there was responsibilities in the household.
And Steven didn't realize that video games where he would be yelling at 1 a.m. in the morning were not okay for us in our early married life. Yeah.
It's true.
What game was this? Ark again?
It was, at that time it was Ark.
Man, T-Rex.
No, you were playing
Fortnite.
Yeah, Fortnite. Oh,
yeah.
Those were dark
days.
days.
It was for a while, yeah. But still, the point is especially in relationships, there's no difference between video games and Netflix in terms of time waste, if you want to call it that.
Yeah.
But gamers use it to build connection and community.
And everything's a compromise when you first get married, right? Like you have to go through that process with whatever you both bring into your lives is going to be part of that. I want to shift the narrative a little bit. Okay, so we've talked about talking to women who are skeptical of being with guys that are really involved in gaming in particular. On the flip side, I think we encounter some guys who are more self-conscious in their dating life because they feel an affinity for the label of being like a nerd, right? And they worry that that's going to be perceived poorly by women. We have stereotypes about this, right? Like the nerdy guy trope, you know, it's the whole like TV shows and movies that kind of depict guys who are more nerdy as being the ones that don't get the girl, right? And then they have to go through some kind of glow up to be seen as, you know,
or
the
be
guy.
Really rich.
Right. You know, and so I don't, first of all, think that's true. Like, I think there are lots of women who, first of all, are involved in the same things. Like, we have women in Synchrony who game and who are into their specific fandoms and who, you know, enjoy certain kinds of like nerddom in their own lives. But I also think that perception that like, if I am into these things, it's going to limit me with women is hurting guys, right? We were joking about this earlier, but I think it's true, Edward, that you are one of the most confident nerds that we know.
Yeah, the joke was I said that you didn't have to add nerd to it. I'm just confident to begin with. All right.
Yeah. And your dating experience was obviously resoundingly successful because you're married to one of the most stunning people on the planet. So
preach it.
Yeah. So let's talk for a minute to like guys who feel like their hobbies and interests limit their dating prospects.
Yeah, absolutely. Gentlemen, this is for you. Seriously though, it's not a crutch. Embrace who you are. If you're a nerd, wear that as a badge, a scarlet letter if you must.
No, scarlet letter is a bad idea. You didn't read that book in high school, obviously.
I read it. I know the A, what the A stood for.
Clearly
it stood
not.
for awesome.
Please stop. For the love of all that is holy. The director said cut.
She thinks I don't know what I'm talking about, but I do. The letter of shame.
Oh my goodness. Oh yeah, okay. I can see the analogy now. Okay.
Scarlet letter.
Going back.
We probably edited a bunch of stuff out just now, but what you missed was a rabbit hole where they argued with me, and I was in too deep about which Spider-Man knew which. Anyway, okay, going back to the idea.
Reinforcing the concept.
Right. Let's go back to the idea of wanting to encourage guys to be confident in who they are, right? Talk to me about, like, and maybe it's probably more of a question for your wife, but put on your Nicole mind for a second. What is it about a confident guy, no matter what he's into, that makes him more dateable? Like, why is that attractive to women?
Maybe I'm putting my wife's brain. He just looks so cute but seriously, no. When it comes to confidence, it really, you just gotta embrace who you are, right? Don't be ashamed of the type of person you've become. But wear that with on your sleeve, right? Is that the term? A better term than what I used earlier?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
But in all honesty, being a nerd shouldn't be a badge of dishonor or something you should be ashamed of. It's just a quirk.
Yeah.
Right? So use that as a superpower to talk to women, have something to include in the conversation instead of just asking, "Oh, where you're from? Oh, that's a cool place."
Yeah.
Really embrace the fact who you are, because at the end of the day, who you are is going to come out to that person you're talking to, and it's better to put that up front than it is to hide who you are and then that person fall in love with the wrong person.
Yeah, people are really hungry for authenticity now because there's so much, like, fake stuff. Like, you know, you can build a whole construct of yourself on social media or a whole image of yourself in our public spaces that doesn't necessarily tell them anything about who they're actually talking to. Like, I think a lot of people are nervous in the dating space because they don't feel like they have a reliable way to know if someone is who they say they are. And so I think when people are just openly themselves unashamedly, like, that's really refreshing for people. I don't know.
I really think that men just have to embrace the idea of just don't care what people think. Right. Well, and by that, I'm not saying be a degenerate.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. What I really mean by that is just be unapologetically you.
Yeah.
Right. Don't try to change who you are to please somebody that you might want to be with. Right. Yeah. Steven?
When you don't have the authenticity, people can see through that. And immediately, I think there's red flags that go up when you think there's a barrier between you and that person that you're trying to talk to. And again, I want to reiterate what Edward said, that it will eventually come out that you are not being your truest self. And then that person will feel like you've been lying to them.
Right.
And it starts off a relationship kind of rocky because you're like, well, why are you not being true and real with me? But at the end of the day, like, I think to give the women the benefit of the doubt of the ones who view it negatively, there is a stigma for people who play video games that it is their whole life and nothing but their life. And there's also a lot of, like, memes. There's also a lot of jokes, and also, like, actually true cases where people took video games way too far, to the point of where
cases.
They got divorces, they left their job because of an update. They've, like, all these big cases where if you are not exposed to video games, like you said, the only video game you had really played was, like, Mario.
Oh, I didn't even play that. I just watched people play it.
That's even what I'm saying.
I played The Sims on GameCube.
Yeah.
With a cheat code in order for us to just build dream houses.
Did you ever put a sim in a pool and then take the ladder off?
No, because I'm not a psychopath.
Yeah, they can't get out. So they just forever swim until the Grim Reaper comes.
That's right.
This got dark.
But the thing is if you are in that isolated world of not knowing what gaming is like, and all you hear is those stories of people who take it too far, they're like, of course I'm not going to want someone who games, because that's their only example.
Yeah.
Or they have friend, like we have a mutual friend that she absolutely hates the idea of her husband playing video games because her father abused it.
Yeah.
And it was her whole childhood of her competing with love with her dad for video games.
Mm.
That's a good reason to not like video games, right?
Yeah.
With that's trauma. But I have a feeling a lot of the cases is just not understanding the scenario.
Right. And like, for what it's worth, like, we're not here to tell any woman that you don't have the right to want what you want or
Of
not
course
want
not.
what you don't want. Like, you get to control what comes into your home. And there are women whose lifestyles are just not conducive to marrying someone who wants to spend their free time indoors gaming,
Yeah.
right? And that's okay. But I think we should be critical of the idea that there's something automatically unhealthy or problematic about it, because like you guys said, I mean, I've over time I've been grateful that you have a hobby that you do at home.
Yeah.
I
also have hobbies I do outside the home too.
Yeah.
But this one I enjoy a lot.
Right. And I've enjoyed like secondhand getting to experience the connections that you maintain with people. Like you have friends all across our state, in different parts of the country sometimes, that you maintain really close connections with. And our family is the beneficiaries of that. Like, and these are people that we've met in real life.
Some of them.
Yeah. Most of them, I think. But so I think it's just something that people should be less quick to blanket statement.
Yeah.
I have one last question for both of you.
Can I add on to that?
Yes, please.
So I just think when we really consider the audience we're talking to,
Mm-hmm.
we're addressing godly people.
Yes.
Right. So by that in itself, that means that those individuals tend to have less vices. Right.
Mm.
If we actually expand that to the broader world, couples are dealing with alcoholism, are dealing with, infidelity, are dealing with a lot of other things that men fill their time with that we might not necessarily have to deal with. Yeah. Even though, not everybody's perfect, but it's not necessarily something that is encouraged by our religion, right?
Yeah.
So I preface that because in our culture, in our church culture, video games are going to get a ton more attention because there's less things to fill our time with. It's
our permissible vice, right?
Exactly. Yes. Right. Movies, TV shows, those are things that are more socially acceptable, regardless of who is partaking in that, right? Mm-hmm. So video games just get this stigma in our church community because that's really all we have, right?
Yeah.
Video games is not a subject as if for people that go clubbing all the time,
Sure.
right? Or people that are gambling nonstop on sports or whatever they're doing.
Right. Yeah, and there are plenty of other things that are part of they're permissible within our church culture that can become gods in people's lives, or not. I mean, anything can be.
Feeding off of what he said, like these people that are in our community that we're trying to match are ideally already living by the fruits of the Spirit.
Yeah.
Right, and one of those being temperance.
Mm-hmm.
Right, which is self-control.
Mm-hmm.
And so in anywhere in our spiritual walk, we should be applying self-control in our life to anything we do.
Yeah.
So I think the moral of the story is reconsider.
Yeah, just maybe leave it open-ended.
Leave it open-ended. There might be someone out there that's perfect for you that just likes to sit in the AC instead of go outside. It's okay.
Okay, I have one last question for both of you. Let's rewind back to the Ancient of Days before, you met Nicole, before you met me, right? You're teenagers.
Lots of Dr. Pepper.
Yes, back when our bodies could tolerate surviving just on soda.
My kidney stones will beg to differ, but
we're at that age. Rewinding back to those moments, what advice would you give your teenage self entering the dating space, letting your nerd flag fly?
You want me to tackle this?
Well, we're both going to tackle
because
it, but you can go first.
I'm confident for a reason. I wouldn't really give advice to my younger self because when it came to dating advice, I was never shy to approach women, right? Yeah. My wife would tell you the story that I courted her for 9 months because I was consistently asking her out, and I would find different ways to say, hey, let's go hang out. And even though she says no, I'm like, oh, it's just friends, or I'll come up with some that chase kind of, right?
Uh-huh.
But I knew what I wanted. You could kind of use that video game analogy. I'm like, I knew what the prize was, so I was trying to figure out how to get there, right?
That's
Oh
right.
man, I was trying to level up.
That's
yeah.
right.
And I leveled up. I warped to the final mission.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
Steven, would you give advice to your younger self in that space?
Honestly, I think I would be less of. I would give what advice I would give to myself is be less ashamed of video games, because looking back, hindsight's 2020. I had just come through a lot of trauma in my childhood, and I was still currently going through childhood when me and trauma in my childhood when me and Edward were hanging out the most, probably. And at the time, all I had was my youth group and video games. Yeah. That was my coping mechanism that kept me sane. And is that the best coping mechanism? Probably not. But it helped me stay grounded and connected to my friends in my youth group. And it kept me also away from negative influences. And so I think there was a little bit of shame wrapped around it, just because, again, there is a taboo nature of spending too much time doing something. But at the time, I didn't have the resources available to me to tell me to do otherwise, except for pray. Yeah. And so for me as a kid, I think that would be the advice I would try to give to myself.
So it sounds like what I'm distilling down to, like, this is just a takeaway for everyone else who's listening. It sounds like if women are thinking about, starting something with a guy who is a gamer, they shouldn't necessarily be considering, like, does he game or does he not game? It's more like, what does he play? Who does he play with? And what are the boundaries that he has around when he plays and how it interacts with the rest of his life? Like, It's not just does he or does he not game. It's how does he game, and does he game in a way that a Christian should be gaming? Does that seem fair?
I think you could simplify it to even just say, does it control him?
Yeah.
Right? I think just being Christians, it's those other questions just kind of just fall away, because of course we're not going to be playing things that are going to fill our hearts or our minds with, like, evil, right?
Yeah.
But that being said, even if you play Hello Kitty's Save the World game, right?
Hello Kitties.
If you're playing 16 hours a day,
right?
Yeah.
What's the farming game that everyone was obsessed with for a while?
Farmville.
Yeah.
Oh, Candy Crush. Like, I know people that are like a level 1,000 on that game. Like, it's like,
Tetris.
No matter what you're doing, it can absorb your life.
Solitaire.
Yeah. Well, this isn't 1999.
But some people got into playing computer solitaire in 1999.
You're an old soul.
And don't consider it to be
That's
a video
the only
game.
video game she can reference.
Yeah.
Sims and Solitaire.
Sims and Solitaire. I'm really,
Minesweeper.
Minesweeper.
I don't even know what that is.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, it comes down to, is it controlling your life or not? And I think that can be applied in anything you do with any area of your life. It's just video games happens to be what some people like to do. Yeah.
Cool. Well, hopefully this doesn't lead to a massive explosion of controversy around we're not here to talk about, like, whether video games should or shouldn't fit into a Christian life. Like, we can talk for forever about whether X, Y, and Z modern thing does or doesn't fit into a Christian life, right? And honestly, that's kind of above my pay grade in terms of, like,
at the end of the day, obey your pastor.
Yeah, listen to what your pastor says. Listen to what the Holy Ghost tells you in your life. And if you're thinking about it in the context of a dating relationship, critically examine what it is you actually care about. Like, it's not about whether or not he's gaming at all. It's how he's using that in his life. And that shouldn't be the only thing that we're critically examining in a prospect, right? Like, there are other things that are important to kind of consider and look at closely before you decide whether or not someone is a good fit for you. So,
can I mention one testimony we came to video games?
Yeah.
Sure.
It's not mine, and I think you know this story. But we have a mutual friend that during the early 2000s went away in college. And he was in room and board and everything. So he had roommates that weren't he went. I want to say maybe I don't know what college, some Florida college.
Mhm.
It was University of Florida, actually.
Yeah. So his roommates weren't godly in any sense, right? So he would use video games in a way to stay connected back to his home church,
Mhm.
right? While his roommates were potentially fornicating and doing partying
Not
and
potential-
potentially. I'm trying to be kind. all right?
Not potentially. It was a very,
But-
very harsh environment for a
But
Christian.
video games kept him
Yeah.
grounded to church, right?
Yeah.
And not necessarily that his walk was being challenged in any way, but it was a
Yeah.
way to kind of drown out what was happening around him.
Mm.
Yeah.
And he still to this day tells people that, and I don't want to say his name because it's
Sure.
not.
Yeah, he's not here to
Yeah.
speak up, but he's
Yeah.
in ministry. I mean, he's
Yeah.
if we're thinking of the same
Yeah.
person.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's a really powerful
Yeah,
testimony.
it never like those challenges never checked his spirit.
Mhm.
It was just a way for him to. You can't be spiritual all the time. You
Right.
can't pray all the time. You can't read the Bible all the time. So the things that he chose to do kept him from having to mentally experience what his roommates were doing in the background.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah. That's awesome. Well, Edward, thank you for letting us force you into a interview or happily doing an interview with us. It's fun. Like we've been getting to hang out. Our kids have been hanging out together for a couple days, and this is the most relaxed I think I've been in months.
years.
Yeah, just because our kids are old enough to like play with each other and self-entertain, and we've been able to sit and talk and like drink so much coffee. It's been great.
Take random naps.
I just want to be able to
Yeah.
get a hold of this constipation.
I'm gonna leave that in.
We have to have a blooper reel for this one.
Yeah.
Anyway, thank you guys for doing this and
Yeah,
for
thank
coming
you.
Nicole, thank you. Nicole, thank you for being the unofficial producer of this.
The
episode.
executive producer.
Yeah, we appreciate that. Just stepping into that role seamlessly. Do we have any announcements we need to make?
Sale.
Yeah, so we still have our summer sale going on. So right now, until the end of July, you can use the code summer_24 to get $75 off of your consultation fee. And we still have Operation 50/50 running, which is our initiative to bring the gender balance of our matching community to become more equal. So we're looking to bring a bunch of guys into the pipeline to help balance things out. So between now and the end of July, if you refer a man to the Synchrony Project and he goes through the consultation process and lets us know that you referred him, your name will be entered into a drawing to win $1,000, and we will pull that at the end of the summer.
That's right.
Do you have any idea how many video games you could buy with $1,000?
So many. Yeah, guys, we're
You know how many,
asking.
you know how many miles you can travel to go visit your date with $1,000?
It's $1,000 could cover a lot.
If you use the code "video games are cool," you get $76 off.
That's not.
Try it. You never know.
We love you guys. Thank you for doing this.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
thank you
Thanks for
guys.
having me.
Hey, babe.
Yeah.
I love you.
I love you too.
And this vacation has been amazing.
It has been amazing. It has been awesome. We still have a couple more days left to go, so it's gonna
I
be
know.
great.
All right. See you guys.
Bye.